Welcome to this week's Week in Wisdom by Creating a Family. Week in Wisdom is when we answer your questions. So please send us your questions because we want your questions in order to be able to answer them. You can send your questions to info@creatingafamily.org. Today's question is from John. He says, "My wife and I adopted a newborn baby almost 3 years ago, and we could not be happier. Now that he is getting a little older, he is talking and starting to understand things. My question is, how can we best normalize his adoption with him? I know it's better for kids to grow up with everyone being open with him and his adoption, so it feels like now is a good time to start. But I am not sure how to do that with an almost 3-year-old. For context, we do not have any contact with his birth family. We send updates and pictures to the agency, but they have not expressed interest in having contact with us. This always seemed like an avenue to start the conversation. You have a birth family and an adoptive family. But without that, I'm not sure how to start talking with him about this. Any help would be greatly appreciated. Thank you." Well, John, you're right. Now is the perfect time to start this conversation. In fact, for other listeners, I would say we really recommend that you start from the moment you bring the child home. Not that the baby's going to be understanding anything you say, but you're getting more comfortable with the conversation. You're getting more comfortable with the words. You're getting more comfortable with the story and all. So we really recommend starting the conversation even earlier. But nevertheless, this is still a great time, and I'm glad you're asking it. Needless to say, I have a lot of suggestions. So to answer your questions first about how to begin, Creating a Family has a lot of resources on this exact topic, how to talk with your kids at different ages about adoption. Two of my favorites are Talking About Adoption Part 1, which is 0 to age 5, and then Talking About Adoption Part 2, which is 6 to 12-year-olds. One thing to note is that, of course, kids process adoption different ways at different stages, if that makes sense. You are in the adoption is cool or adoption is absolutely normal stage. Kids take everything for granted. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Many kids just assume that everybody is adopted. This is especially the case if he is your only child and you don't have a child by birth. Then they just assume everybody is. That will not last, and you shouldn't expect it to, but that's the stage that your son is likely to be in. Now, 5 tips. My first tip, and probably the most important, is that children's books are your friend. And your son is at the golden age for them because there are so many options, so many picture books. You should have some of these in your library. Creating a Family has the best that I have seen. I know I'm bragging, but it's just the truth. We have a list of books, adoption books, broken out by type of adoption and age of the child. You should go through, and we've written reviews for all of them. And you should go through and pick out some that you should own them. They should be sitting with the stack of all the other books you have. They should be sitting right there, and you should pull them out to the top and continue to and read them. You can also go to the library. Bigger libraries usually have a pretty good selection as well. Books make it easy for you. They do all the work for you for the most part. And they have a huge range from books that talk about the specific types of adoption, books that talk about birth parents. And you should also include books that talk about all the different ways that families are made and that all families are good, regardless of how they are made. We have a lot of books like that as well. Include those in your rotation. Many of the books, or at least some of the books, I should say, have a section for parents, and that's always helpful to read that. They will give you also suggestions for how to raise the conversation with your child. So books, children's books, you couldn't do better. My second tip is to make sure you're talking about birth parents. You were saying in your question that, well, since we don't have contact, that's not an avenue in, that we can't really say, well, you've got 2 families. But in fact, he does have 2 families. He has a birth family, even though he doesn't have contact, and he has his adoptive family, the family that is raising him. I think in my experience, most adoptive parents are fairly comfortable talking about adoption with their kids, but they struggle when it comes to talking about birth parents. And that's especially the case when you don't have contact. It makes it harder. But that's the situation you're in. But that doesn't mean you don't talk about them. And the problem is when we don't talk about birth parents, kids pick up on that hesitancy and they begin to feel that it's a topic that we are uncomfortable with, because quite frankly, sometimes it is. And they're picking up accurately our discomfort. Or even if you're totally comfortable and you're not talking about it, then they don't know that it's okay to talk about. And that leads to feelings of disloyalty, like I'm thinking about my birth parents, and does that make me bad? So you got guilt thrown in there. Or I really wonder about my birth parents, but I don't want to hurt my parents' feelings, so I'm not going to say anything. Those are not things that any child should have to deal with. And it's up to us as parents to broach the subject, because our kids are not going to. And they're afraid of hurting, or potentially afraid of hurting our feelings. So you have to start talking about his birth parents. And there are books that will help you do that. And you'll see those at our list of books. My third suggestion is make sure you continue to talk about adoption as he ages. And honestly, in my personal experience, it got harder because when they're little, you're reading to them. And I love children's literature anyway, so you're sitting there reading, and the books are great, and they cover a whole host of different topics. But at some point, they outgrow us reading to them. My first point is that don't let that happen sooner than it needs to. There are a lot of good older kid books, chapter books and things that have adoption themes to them. They're not usually specific that adoption is the primary thing, although there are some. But there's lots of books, great books, that adoption is part of. It's just a part of the book. I loved and continued to read to my children. We moved into chapter books, and they were reading on their own easily, but we still had a chapter book we were reading. And I would encourage you to try to, even if that wasn't something you were thinking about doing, and number one, it's a great way to bond and connect with your kids. But second, it's a way to continue to bring adoption into a natural way into the conversation. There are other ways, TV shows, something that's happening or whatever that you could continue. You have to look for opportunities. In my experience, it became harder because I had to be more intentional. But my tip to you is to make it intentional, because it's easy to say, I've already had the conversation. But as with all big conversations with kids, it's not one conversation. It's a series of many conversations. And with each conversation, as they grow, their understanding changes and their processing of adoption changes. At some point, your son is not going to be adoption is cool stage. He's going to be moving into the I wonder why my birth parents didn't keep me stage. You've got to be talking with him at that stage so that you have input to help him understand, even if you can't answer 100% of his questions. You want to be able to have input there. Also, I can't tell you the number of parents who say, well, I'm here to answer his questions. If he has questions, he'll ask them. That is absolutely not true. First of all, you may have a kid who isn't a question asker. I had one, just didn't ask a lot of questions. That doesn't mean that they aren't asking questions, they aren't thinking about it. In fact, I guarantee they're thinking about it. And also, some kids don't ask questions because they're afraid that it's going to hurt our feelings or it's going to upset us by asking questions. And then also, oftentimes they don't know the questions to ask. You don't know what you don't know when you don't know it. So they won't know the questions to ask. It is our job as a parent to continue to bring this up. And sometimes the conversation goes flat. You can say, do you ever think about your birth parents? So on your birthday or something, do you ever think about your birth parents? I think about your birth parents sometimes on your birthday. And your kid may go, no. But it can initiate a discussion. It is not a failure if your kid doesn't engage in the discussion, because you've sent the message that I'm open for this conversation. And when they are ready to talk, they will have less hesitancy to come to you. I think in terms of it, I throw the ball, they can choose to catch it or not. So our third tip, continue to talk about adoption as he ages. Fourth tip, be around other families who are created by adoption. There are lots of opportunities. Maybe your agency has, if it's a local agency, has gatherings. There may be a local adoption support group. You may have to drive to a nearby larger town to find that. Or you can just keep your eye out for other families who have children of similar ages. They're everywhere, and create your own gathering. We're going to have a cookout because other parents will understand. I want my kid to see that there are lots of families formed by adoption. So invite them over, and you will get to know the parents, but more importantly, your children see that adoption is just one of the many ways that families are formed. And our fifth tip, or my fifth tip, is to create a life book for your child. Creating a Family has lots of resources on how to do it. Just go to our website, creatingafamily.org, and in the search bar, type in life books. We'll get very specific examples on how to do it. But one of the things you need to include in the life book is information about their birth parents. And it's harder if you don't have contact. And when you include information, it would be really helpful if you can include pictures, which means that you may need to go through the agency and ask and explain, I'm making a life book. We anticipate that our son will have questions and would like to see pictures. Can you send them? I know plenty of parents who have had to go onto social media and find the birth parents there and see if they can find pictures. But that's an important part of a life book for your son. John, this is a great question. As you could tell, I really enjoyed answering it. Went a little long this time, but it was an important question. It's also a great question. And I'm so glad you and your wife are happy as clams. I'm sure your son is as well. And I wish you the best of luck with this. And before everybody leaves, let me remind you that we could really use a ranking, a rating, a star rating. That's how all the services use to rank and to suggest podcasts. So that would really help us. I'm going to briefly go through the three big ways people are watching. One, Apple, to leave a rating, a star rating or a review. You go to the Creating a Family podcast page. That's the page where all the episodes are listed. And then at the bottom, you will see a place where you can give a star ranking. And right below that's a button for write a review. On Spotify, to leave a rating, you select the highlighted ratings on the podcast page itself, where all the episodes are listed. And you could see where you could do a star rating. To leave a specific comment on this show, then go to the show page itself. That's when you click on it and what the page you're listening to it on, and you can leave a comment. And then on YouTube, just leave a comment, and we read every single one of them. So thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Wisdom. If you have a friend, let them know that they can subscribe to the creatingafamily.org podcast to listen to our Weekend Wisdoms. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.